Hey everybody, welcome back to another reasonable price prediction, the series where we try to figure out where your favorite altcoins could be headed. Today we are looking at Litecoin. And if you want me to cover Litecoin again in the future, be sure to leave this video a like. Anyway, getting straight into it, we can see that more or less from May onwards, we have been below the bull market support band. Not May, sorry, June, excuse me. And we are currently back on to test this low that we've tested multiple times over the last 12 months, which is $60. You can see that if we actually zoom in, we've wicked well below the $60, all the way down to the $49 range only a few weeks ago. And as the general trend does show, we are most likely going to continue to trade downwards, as we are also well below the bull market support band. Short-term price action for Litecoin is not looking good. However, again, if we zoom out and take a look at the bigger picture, we can see that during Litecoin's previous cycle, or at least after the 2021 bull run, we didn't trade much lower than $49. So potentially that could be the lowest that we go, down to this $50 range. Whether we get a weekly close down there, who knows? But hopefully we find the support that we have found over the last 12 months at this $60 range, and we don't get a weekly close below. However, if we take a look at previous cycles and compare what Litecoin has done in and around the halving time, we can see that back in 2020, Litecoin actually did break down below its support, which was at $40 at the time. Now, this was because of COVID, so you can choose to exclude that if you wish. If we go back to 2016 and we zoom in, we can see that, again, Litecoin didn't break down below this trend. We had wicks, but ultimately it followed the trend. And do note that this trend was actually bullish, but the current one and the one in 2020 are not. Now, the two main things I want to look at in this video on the Litecoin US dollar pair are timeframes, and the first being this 27-week one, but more specifically from our first high that we break out of this range from. We can see that every halving just before and just afterwards, Litecoin has followed, or excuse me, it's stayed within a support and a resistance, with usually one exception where it breaks out to the above. Now, in 2016, we got the breakout just before the halving. In 2020, we got it quite a few months before the halving. And then back in 2024, we got it just before the halving again. So we made the comparison to 2024 to 2016, where the breakout took place just before the halving. The time frames then between the first breakout and the second rally, so the rally where we see Litecoin move back to the upper range of this kind of band that it operates within, takes place about 29 weeks after the first high, after we break out of this range. If we take a look at 2020, we see a very similar story where we get 27 weeks after this breakout where we retest the high. Now, if we take a look at what that currently means for us, we can see that we broke out of our range back at the end of March or beginning of April, whichever you prefer. The high was at the beginning of April. And ever since then, we've traded back down. We've come back into this range, and we've even come back down to these lows. Potentially, if you want to map the two previous halving cycle price performance, you could expect a bounce on these lows, as after we do get this breakout, we do come back to the lows every single time. Even here, we go down to the lows just a few weeks before we get a rally up and test the upside again. But just to summarize and make it simple, we do come back down and test this low before moving back up to test the high again. We have now just come down and tested this low. Potentially, we could be moving to the upside. If we take a measurement of 28 weeks, which is just an average of the 27 and the 29, that puts us towards the end of the year. That would be the 14th of October that we would see this second peak. But when we do get this second peak, oftentimes we do get a retracement. Back in 2020, we did get a retracement basically back down to the support that Litecoin had been trading within for that similar time frame, that 12 months. And you could argue that we look a lot more like 2020 than we do 2016, as we've had this flatline support instead of the slow trending up support like we saw in 2016. Either way, in 2016, or even technically 2017, we did see Litecoin return back down to the lower band, to that support. So if you want to go off previous price performance, you can expect a rally. Now is the time that Litecoin will most likely get a rally. Maybe we'll bounce off this support once more, but ultimately you don't think we're going to get a weekly close below $60. However, if you're just looking at the chart itself, looking at the general trends, basically since 2022, Litecoin has been putting in lower highs. We can see here, lower high, lower high. You could draw a line something like this to basically indicate how Litecoin has been just bleeding since February of 2022. The short term also indicates that we are due more poor price action. And again, with the lows this cycle being around $47, if you showed me just this screen and said, where is this asset most likely to go? I would probably say back down to the lows. But again, of course, nobody knows for sure. The second time frame that I wanted to compare was how long it takes for Litecoin to rally, to bounce off its final low before going into a bull market. And I'm measuring the kind of final low by the first strong green week that we get. So we can see here, I need to bring this up so you can see it. But we can see that this is what I count as the first strong green week here. Back in 2020, we can see it was 36 weeks. That's when we entered our bull run. That's where we got the crazy parabolic action where we went from prices of $50 all the way up to $412, $13 for Litecoin. If we go back to 2016 and we zoom in on this chart and measure from the first proper green week that we get from the high, we can see, if I bring this up so that we can actually see, from the high to the first green week, it took 40 weeks. So it took 40 weeks from this high to enter into the bull run. So again, between both of these time frames, we had similar durations of time. 40 weeks for the first cycle, 36 weeks for the second. Potentially, if we were to map that onto current times, or even take an average, whichever you prefer, if we zoom in here, we can see that from the high that we got in the first week of April, projecting that out 38 weeks, which is just an average, we can see that puts us towards the end of December. Again, 40 weeks brings us out to the beginning of January, 36 weeks brings us to the beginning of December. So ultimately, it projects the end of this year is when we're going to see Litecoin enter a bull run, which is interesting. So we have a lot of these different time frames, a lot of these different peaks, coincidentally, all lining up with how they've looked in the past. Even with the price range move, we can see that each halving, the fluctuation is pretty similar, where it ranges from around a 100%, basically a 2x in price action from the low to the high. Litecoin operates within that for about a year during the halving, before and after. Another good argument that you might have for Litecoin, or a good point that you might want to raise, that if we compare 2020 to 2024, and we take a look at where these highs were, we can see this first one was at $80, this low here that we bounced off was at $40, and this second high was at about $65, $70. If we check roughly how much of a difference, just in terms of US dollar, that we've seen from this cycle with these peaks and these lows, we can see that again, over here at this blue, it's about $100, $105. So roughly we're adding about $25 here, a $25 increase from the previous cycle down to this low, again $40, up to this low, it's about $60. So plus about $20 here. So you might want to make the argument that this orange, this high that we will reach, which again was at about $70 or just below $70, excuse me, the weekly close was at 65. You could just add 25 to that, and that could potentially be where we might peak out again. Again, $25 to $65 would put you at around $90. So to summarize, if you want to project previous price action, we should see a bounce here at this level of $60 up to potentially $90. And then again, if it's going to play out like it has historically, which has no guarantee of doing, but it does look very similar to it currently, we could then see a pullback towards the end of the year. We should reach this $90 mark around October time, and then have a pullback over the space of a month and a half, before then rallying up into our bull run for 2025. Again, I think a long enough time has passed now that the left translated cycle theory is more or less dead. If you do believe in the left translated cycle theory, you're basically saying that this bull run that we had here back in April, March time was our big bull run. And if that's the case, then we're in some real trouble, because Litecoin basically did nothing. If we take a look here, we actually went up approximately 2x. So if that's the big bull run you were hoping for, you still could have made some money, but it's nothing compared to what we've had historically. And even if we got a huge bull run tomorrow, I wouldn't argue it's a left translated cycle peak, because oftentimes you could argue that the start of the bull run was here back in 2020, and that was March. You could argue the start of the bull run was with this first rally, and that was in August. That was actually August 10th. So technically we're late in a way. It all depends on how you want to frame it, but I would say left translated cycle theory is dead. Anyway, just some points to keep in mind. Again, something else quickly just to point out was that during this first cycle, over 29 weeks, Litecoin saw about $4.2 million of trading volume over the course of the halving. During the second halving, Litecoin saw about $42 million over the space of 27 weeks, basically half a year. So just note the change there is 10x in trading volume. And Litecoin, just to point out, isn't a coin that has any TVL. You can't lock away your Litecoin. You can't stake your Litecoin. You can only buy and sell Litecoin. So far, with this halving, while we haven't had the exact same period of time, we've still got about 7 weeks left before we reach the 200-day time frame that the previous two we've compared are. But so far, we're only at just about $9 million of trading volume. So it does show that the interest has dwindled. And while from first to second, there was a big leap in trading volume, from second to third, there's been a big decline, a big step backwards. So again, just something to keep in mind. Anyway, looking at the Bitcoin chart, again, I always love saying it. This is my favorite chart in crypto because I am quite a Bitcoin maximalist, or at least I have been over the last year at least, but realistically 2 years. Litecoin BTC is the chart that I go to whenever I need to reaffirm my faith in Bitcoin, because as you can see, basically ever since Litecoin's launch, it has just lost value compared to Bitcoin. And what's more depressing is that as the cycles go on, Litecoin puts up less and less of a fight. So we can see here this first cycle, we're moving up and down the range against Bitcoin, getting these really strong, crazy weeks. Back in 2015, we can see Litecoin rallying. Let me just check this quickly. In the space of 8 weeks, it rallies up 400% against Bitcoin. Really strong moves. The second cycle back in 2017, we see Litecoin move up 500% in a similar time frame. 8 weeks, Litecoin showing real strength. If we keep going down, however, we see, 2021, the best bull run crypto ever saw. In the space of 6, 7, 8 weeks, we're getting 100% moves. Again, this was the bull run that bought Bitcoin from $6,000 up to $69,000. And Litecoin basically did a 2x in the space of a couple of weeks against Bitcoin. But it didn't do this for a long period of time like most altcoins do, where they slowly put higher and higher legs against Bitcoin. Litecoin just struggled its way up. And again, as we can see, zooming into current day, we've basically been trading down for well over a year. And in every single video that I've done on Litecoin, I've tried to warn you guys that basically about a year before and about a year afterwards, Litecoin trades down during the halving. About a year before the halving, a year after the halving, Litecoin trades down. But what's even more shocking this time is that if you look at previous halvings and how Litecoin performs, we can see that there's green weeks. There's a couple of months there where Litecoin does really well and it moves back up above its bull market support band. Even if it does go back below it relatively quickly, it puts up a fight here and there. Second halving, again, Litecoin puts up quite a few fights, and it actually kind of rides just below the bull market support band for about a year before it breaks back up above it again in the 2021 bull run, but kind of again continues that trend, just riding below it up until June 2022, gets a little bit of a fight above, pushes back up above in December timeframe, but it then breaks down back below, and ever since it's just traded down. And while before, during these halving timeframes, we've had rallies, we've had little wicks up above the bull market support band, Litecoin hasn't seen that, with the only exception being back in April 1st. April 1st was when Solana was reaching $200, when Pepe and Bonk and WIF were all exploding. Litecoin was basically struggling to break above its bull market support band. Again, that's the best price action we've seen in crypto for the last 2 years. Bitcoin broke above its all-time high. Litecoin, again, not above its bull market support band. And it looks like it's going to continue trading that way for God knows how long, to be honest with you. Potentially until we meet this lower range from kind of 700 Satoshis down. If we take a look again, we can see that oftentimes Litecoin does come down into this lower, range, either straight away after the halving, and then it gets a correction and a strong bounce. Last cycle, we can see we only came to it towards the end of the year, at the end of the cycle. I'm personally not pricing in a Litecoin recovery until at least the end of the year. And again, if we do follow the same trend, that is where we should meet this lower value range at the end of the year. So there are a lot of things with Litecoin and the general crypto space that point to us having a recovery, a reverse, or a bull run, whatever you want to call it, by the end of the year. So that is just something to keep in mind. Now, I do want to show you something a little different. I think it's hard when you look at Litecoin and compare it to sats. I think it's hard to gauge a value when looking at sats. So let's instead look at how much one Bitcoin could buy you Litecoin at any period of time. So we can see when we launched, you could buy 27 Litecoin with one Bitcoin. And today, you can buy 1,000 Litecoin with one Bitcoin. Again, at the peak of the 2021 rally, you could buy 150 Litecoin with one Bitcoin. Now it's 1,000 Litecoin. So you can see Litecoin's value against Bitcoin has just plummeted. And if you want to go back to 2019, we can see when we got this rally early in the year, kind of early Q2, one Bitcoin was worth 57 Litecoins. Litecoin is now 200 times weaker than where it was in 2019, basically 5 years plus. And its value has just gone down compared to Bitcoin. And again, it doesn't look like it's slowing down anytime soon. It's basically been on a strong upward trend since January of 2023. Anyway, I thought that comparison might help a little bit. If you like the video, guys, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps out. And comment down below if you want to see more Litecoin videos, or if you want me to cover an altcoin that you're interested in. Also consider clicking the video up here, as Google thinks you will like it. So you probably will like it. Thanks so much for watching till the end, guys. Take care and peace.